Learning target 4 is deciding on a domain and range for a relationship. Okay, so we're talking about a real-world context, and you have to determine an appropriate domain and range. Remember that your domain goes with x, or the IV, the independent variable, and your range goes with your y, or your dv, the dependent variable. Okay, so when I'm determining a domain and range, I'm talking about x and y. So I've already given you that the independent variable is the number of shirts and the dependent variable is the profit. So we need to read through this situation, and I know I'm going to think about the number of shirts that would be reasonable for my domain, and the profit, the reasonable profit for the range. Okay? So Joe decides to start a business. He's printing designs on t-shirts and he's selling them for $25 each. The machine costs him $1,000, and the materials for each shirt cost $7.50. To get started, Joe orders 500 t-shirts. So first of all, I just want to know how much profit he's going to make for each shirt. So it's $7.50 for each shirt, and he's selling them for $25. So I'm going to take 25 minus $7.50 to tell me what that profit is going to be for each one. $17.50 is the profit per t-shirt. Okay, and then he starts off by spending $1,000 on the printing machine. Okay, and then also it says to get started he orders 500 t-shirts. Okay, so he hasn't sold those yet. So I would also want to know how much he's starting in the hole. So he's starting in the hole $1,000, as well as 500 t-shirts times the $7.50 that they cost each. Okay? So let's go ahead and calculate that out. $37.50. Add those together, and he starts off already $4,750 in the hole. Okay, so the number of shirts, I would start with probably 500, because if he ordered 500, I would say that hopefully he's going to, well, let's start with 0. Okay, so let's start with 0. So let's say that the domain, let's imagine, this isn't what we would hope for Joe, but we're going to just talk about all the possibilities. Okay, so if we're thinking about his business, there is a possibility he'd sell 0 t-shirts. Okay, so let's say anywhere from 0 to, and then I don't know what would be reasonable. He ordered 500, so he thinks he's going to sell at least that much. So let's say he sells double what he thinks. So let's go from 0 to 1,000. Okay, and then for my range, I'm going to say negative 4,750, because that's going to be my profit for him if he sells 0 t-shirts. And then my range should match 1,000 here. So it should match 1,000 basically, because then that's when he will, or that's what we've decided is his maximum amount of t-shirts that he's going to sell. So I want to figure out the profit if he does 1,000 t-shirts. Okay, so if he does 1,000 t-shirts, that means he's going to make $17.50 per t-shirt times 1,000. So let's do $17.50. So that would be $17,500 that he would make off of 1,000 t-shirts. Okay, and then from that, I need to take away the $1,000 that he started off with for his materials, so that gives me $16,500. So the range goes all the way up to $16,000 and $500. Okay, and then also something that I expected of my students, and I'm not sure about Miss Olson and Mr. Graff, but I took off points if you did not write it as an inequality, because I talked about that several times in class. So my x goes from 0 to 1,000, and I use the inequality symbols for that. And my y goes all the way from negative 4,750 to positive 16,500. Okay? All right, go ahead and try it for this next problem. This is going to be a little bit less math to figure these out and a little bit more reasoning skills. Okay? So you're going to talk about 2 different situations, and you're going to determine what you think is an appropriate domain and range. And you are going to write them as inequalities. Okay? So you're going to practice doing that. So you're going to pause the video here, copy the problems down, try them out, play the video when you're ready to check your answers, and then most importantly, bring them with you to when you do your retake. And also make sure that you ask any questions that you have before you take that test. We want you to do better on the test the second time, not take it and make the same mistakes over again. Okay? Let's go ahead and pause the video, and when you're ready, I will talk through what I came up with as solutions. Okay, so as I talked about with my classes, a lot of times these are going to be very different answers from what you have, okay? Or maybe it just might be a little bit different. So you just have to be as descriptive as possible, and when you're doing it, I'm going to do it out loud, but on your test, what you would want to do is you would want to write down your justification for why you made the domain and range the way that they are, okay? Because there is always a reasonable domain and range, but what you decide is reasonable might be a little bit different than me, and as long as you write through it, and I think it's not completely out of the realm of possibility, I'm okay. So like, for example, when we're talking about time, I would never want you to use a negative time. Well, I don't want to say never, but most of the time you wouldn't say negative days or negative hours, okay? So I would expect that your time would be 0 to start with, and then anything reasonable. We're not going to talk about 100 days that this carton of milk was left out of the refrigerator, because that would probably be ridiculous. And at that point in time, the temperature of the milk wouldn't really matter anymore, okay, because it's just going to be the same after a certain number of days. And so I described my independent and dependent variable in days and in degrees Fahrenheit, so you'd want to make sure you include that information for me, okay, so that I know what you're describing. And then I know you're describing X as time in days, and I wrote 0 to 2. So we're just talking about up to 2 days that a carton of milk might be out of the refrigerator. And I thought that when it starts off, it might be 32 degrees. That's the lowest that the degree might be of the milk. Anything below that, it might start to freeze. And then I said up to 80 degrees because the milk will probably never go over room temperature, and I don't think that milk would probably be out in anything above 80 degrees. But that's just my reasoning. Maybe you have something different, okay? And then in this one, I thought about it as the temp. This is one where the time is actually the dependent variable, because I think that depending on what you set your temperature of your oven to be, the amount of time your roast needs to be in there is different. So for example, if I put my roast in there at a really low temperature, it's going to have to be in for a long time to get all the way cooked. Versus if I put it in at a really high temperature, it's going to take even less time for it to cook. So what I wrote down here is I said that the temperature could be anywhere from 100 to 400 degrees. I just thought that was reasonable because if you're actually trying to cook it, you're not going to use 0 degrees. And the lowest I've ever seen a temperature set at is 100, and the highest I've ever seen it set at is 400. And then I said that I thought it would take anywhere from 2 to 12 hours, depending on how hot you set it. If you set it really hot, maybe it only takes 2 hours to cook. If you set it really cold, or not very hot, it probably would take maybe up to 12 hours to cook. And I'm really not sure if those are perfect, but that's my reasoning, and I think that it's at least somewhat of a reasonable way to describe this situation. Okay, so make sure you ask any questions that you have before you come to class or before you're ready to do your retake, and bring this sheet with you when you're going to do that retake.